street kid mocked by engineers, until he fixes a generator that sat broken for a decade. Tyler was just 12 years old when his life completely changed on that hot December day in Chicago. He had been wandering the streets of the industrial South Side for hours, his stomach growling with hunger, when he spotted the slightly open gate of a large construction company. The boy hesitated for a few seconds before timidly stepping into the yard. His bare feet carefully touched the hot concrete floor as he searched for someone who might give him some leftover food. That's when a group of engineers, all dressed in their impeccable blue shirts, noticed him. They were gathered around a makeshift table, discussing blueprints and plans when the boy approached. "Excuse me," Tyler murmured, his voice barely audible. "What's this?" exclaimed Robert Jenkins, the lead engineer, looking up from his papers. "How did this kid get in here?" The other professionals turned to look at the boy. Tyler wore a worn-out brown shirt, covered in dirt, and his torn pants barely covered his scraped knees. His hair was messy, and the grime on his face couldn't hide his frightened brown eyes. I just wanted to know if you had anything to eat," the boy said, shrinking back. "Food?" laughed Brandon, one of the younger engineers. "This is a company, not a soup kitchen, kid." "Get out of here before we call security," another engineer added, waving his hand dismissively. Tyler was about to turn away when his eyes landed on something in the corner of the yard. It was an old industrial generator, covered in rust and dust, clearly abandoned for years. The boy stopped, his eyes widening, and he took a few steps toward the equipment. "Hey, where do you think you're going?" Robert Jenkins shouted. "This generator," Tyler began, moving closer to the machine. "It's a Pinnacle Series X, isn't it?" The engineers exchanged surprised glances. Brandon burst out laughing. "Listen to this. The street rat thinks he knows generators," he mocked. "I bet this kid doesn't even know how to change a light bulb." "That's right," another engineer agreed, laughing. "He probably heard the name somewhere and wants to show off." Robert Jenkins approached the boy with a superior air. "Listen here, kid. This generator hasn't worked in over 10 years. The best professionals in this company have tried to fix it and failed. You really think you know something about it?" Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us newcomers. Now back to the story. Tyler didn't back down. He kept examining the generator, his small hands carefully touching the rusted surface. "My grandpa had one just like this," the boy said quietly. "He taught me a lot." Laughter echoed across the yard. Office workers began gathering near the windows, curious about the commotion. Among them was Mrs. Betty, the 68-year-old cleaner who had worked at the company for over 20 years. "What's all this noise?" asked Richard, the company owner, stepping out of his office. He was a man in his 60s with graying hair and a flawless gray suit. "Sorry, Mr. Richard," Robert Jenkins said quickly. "It's just a street kid who came in asking for food. We're sending him away now." Richard observed the scene. The dirty, ragged boy standing before the old generator, the engineers laughing and mocking, the employees watching from the windows. Something about it deeply unsettled him. "Wait," Richard said, raising his hand. "What did the boy say about the generator?" "Oh, he's making up that he knows about the equipment," Brandon replied with disdain. "Said his grandfather had one just like it." Richard walked slowly over to where Tyler stood. The boy looked at him with a mix of fear and hope. "What's your name, son?" "Tyler, sir." "And you said you know this kind of generator?" "Yes, sir. My grandfather was a mechanic. Before he..." Tyler paused, swallowing hard. "Before he passed, he taught me a lot." Richard grew thoughtful for a moment. Then a glint appeared in his eyes. "All right, I'll make an offer," Richard announced loudly so everyone could hear. "If this boy can get the generator running, he'll get a reward. But if he fails, he can never come back here. What do you all say?" The engineers buzzed with excitement. Robert Jenkins rubbed his hands, pleased. "Perfect. That'll get rid of this nuisance once and for all." "I accept," Tyler said, his voice shaky but firm. "You sure about this, son?" Richard asked, studying the boy. "It's your only shot." "I'm sure, sir." "Then so be it. You have till the end of the day." Tyler stepped up to the generator and began examining it with impressive focus. His small hands moved over the parts with a familiarity that surprised even the skeptics. He opened panels, checked connections, inspected components. "Look at him pretending he knows what he's doing," Robert Jenkins muttered to his colleagues. But Jason, one of the younger and more observant engineers, noticed something different. "Hold on," he said, stepping closer. "He's not just doing things randomly. He's following a logical sequence." "Don't be ridiculous, Jason," Brandon scolded. "He's just some street kid." Tyler ignored the comments. He was completely absorbed in the generator, recalling everything his grandfather had taught him during those hard days at the scrapyard where they lived. Memories came in waves, his grandfather's calloused hands guiding his, the patient voice explaining each part, each function. "I'll need some tools," Tyler said after half an hour of inspection. "Tools?" Robert Jenkins laughed. "Sure, let's give professional tools to some street brat. What a joke." "Let him ask for what he needs," Richard intervened. "A screwdriver, pliers, and—" Tyler glanced around the yard. "That wire over there and— Can I use that old pot lid?" The engineers burst into laughter. "A pot lid? Wire?" Brandon could barely speak through his chuckles. "This is even better than I expected." "They're the tools I know," Tyler said simply. "My grandfather taught me to work with what's available." Mrs. Betty, who had been watching from the window, felt her heart tighten. She hurried down and approached Richard. "Mr. Richard, may I say something?" "Of course, Mrs. Betty." "That boy, I've seen him before. He's been sleeping outside the company for months. Sometimes I spot him late at night, staring at the machines through the fence." Richard raised his eyebrows, surprised. "Why didn't you mention this sooner?" "Didn't think it was my place, sir. But it's true. I've seen him studying our equipment from outside many times." Meanwhile, Tyler had started working. With precise movements, he removed parts, cleaned components, checked connections. The sun was high now, and sweat dripped down the boy's face, mixing with the grime. "Look, he's sweating for nothing," Robert Jenkins remarked. "He'll give up soon." But Tyler showed no signs of quitting. He worked methodically, and gradually, he began spotting issues no one had noticed before. "This is wrong," he murmured, pointing to a series of modifications in the electrical system. "Someone swapped these parts, but put them all in wrong." Jason stepped closer, curious. "What do you mean, wrong?" "See," Tyler showed. "This part here is from a different model. Someone tried to adapt it, but the voltage isn't compatible. And here, these wires were connected in the wrong order." Jason examined what the boy was showing and turned pale. "My God, he's right," he whispered. "What?" Robert Jenkins stepped forward, annoyed. "Don't be ridiculous, Jason." "No, look for yourself. The kids spotted modifications we made years ago. Remember when we tried to adapt those parts because the originals were too expensive?" Robert Jenkins' face turned red. He did remember, and it had been his idea to make those changes to save money. "That doesn't mean anything," he said defensively. "Anyone could have noticed that." "Anyone?" Jason stared at him. "We're trained engineers and we didn't notice in 10 years. The mood in the yard began to shift. Some employees who had been watching from the windows started coming down, curious. Among them was Jessica, a young secretary who discreetly began recording everything on her phone. Tyler kept working, oblivious to the growing audience. He had found more problems. Years of shoddy repairs had created a tangled mess of wires and incorrect connections. "It's like a puzzle," he muttered to himself. "Just got to put each piece in the right place." 2 hours passed. The sun was relentless, and Tyler was starting to show signs of exhaustion. His stomach growled loudly, reminding everyone he'd arrived there asking for food. "Poor boy," Mrs. Betty whispered to a co-worker. "He's starving and still trying." "Someone should at least give him water," the co-worker suggested. Just then, Catherine, Richard's wife, arrived at the company. She was an elegant woman, around 58, wearing a navy blue dress. "Richard, I came to pick you up for lunch." She stopped when she saw the scene in the yard. "What's going on here?" Richard quickly explained the situation. Catherine watched the boy working and suddenly pressed a hand to her chest. "My God, I know that boy." What do you mean? Richard asked. A few weeks ago, when I was leaving the supermarket, he tried to sell me some paper flowers. I remember him because he was so polite even when I said I didn't want to buy. He said he was saving up for medicine. Medicine? Yes. He said someone in his family was sick. I felt bad, but I thought it might be a lie, you know how it is. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now back to the story. As this conversation unfolded, Tyler made an important discovery. At the bottom of the generator, nearly invisible under layers of dirt and rust, he found an identification plate. Carefully, he wiped the surface and read the inscription, his eyes filled with tears. Henry Walker Johnson, he read aloud. What is it, son? Asked Jason, who was nearby. That was my grandfather's name, Tyler said, his voice breaking. This generator was his. A heavy silence fell over the yard. Richard quickly stepped closer. What are you saying? My grandfather, Henry Walker Johnson. He had a small workshop many years ago. When he got sick, he had to sell everything to pay for treatment. He told me about a special generator he had to sell to a big company. I never imagined it was this one. Wait, Richard turned to his assistant. Check our records. When did we buy this generator? After a few minutes on the phone, the assistant returned. Sir, we bought this generator 12 years ago from a man named Henry Walker Johnson. It's all documented. The revelation completely changed the atmosphere. Even Robert Jenkins seemed unsettled. Tyler, meanwhile, now worked with renewed determination. It was no longer just about winning a reward or proving he could do it. It was about honoring his grandfather's memory. Your grandfather must have been a remarkable man, Richard said softly. He was everything to me, Tyler replied without stopping his work. After my parents, he paused. After I was left alone, he took care of me, taught me everything he knew, said knowledge was the only thing no one could take from you. Michael, a veteran engineer who had stayed quiet until then, stepped closer. Son, can I help with anything? Robert Jenkins shot him a glare. Michael, stay out of this. Stay out of it? Michael stared back. Robert, this 12-year-old boy spotted problems none of us with all our training even saw. I think we ought to show a little humility. Humility? Robert Jenkins was furious. You want me to accept that some street kid knows more than trained engineers? It's not about knowing more, Jason cut in. It's about knowing differently. He learned hands-on by doing. More employees came down to the yard. Some brought water, others offered snacks. Tyler accepted gratefully but didn't stop working. I need to finish before sunset, he said. That's when Robert Jenkins, seeing his authority threatened and the growing support for the boy, made a desperate move. When no one was looking, he approached the generator and discreetly disconnected some wires Tyler had just fixed. But Jessica, who was still filming, caught everything. Hey, she shouted, what are you doing? Everyone turned to Robert Jenkins, his hands still on the wires. I was just checking the boy's work, he stammered. Liar! Jessica held up her phone. I filmed it all. You were sabotaging him. Richard turned pale. Robert Jenkins, is this true? The lead engineer flushed, then went white. There was no denying the video evidence. Mr. Richard, you don't understand. If this kid fixes the generator, what will that say about us? What will people think? They'll think we're professional enough to recognize talent wherever it is, Richard replied coldly. You're fired, Robert Jenkins. Gather your things and leave. But Mr. Richard... Now! Robert Jenkins stormed off, throwing one last hateful glance at Tyler. The boy, who had watched it all, simply went back to work, patiently reconnecting the wires that had been undone. You're not going to say anything? Jason asked. My grandfather used to say anger gets in the way of work, Tyler answered simply. I need to focus. The hours passed. The sun began to set, painting the sky orange and red. Tyler had taken apart and reassembled multiple parts of the generator, fixing years of accumulated mistakes. His movements grew quicker, as if racing against time. Almost there, he murmured. Just a few more adjustments. By then, nearly every employee in the company had gathered in the yard, forming a circle around the boy and the generator. Mrs. Betty had brought him a stool to sit on, and someone had rigged up a cover to shield him from the sun. "This reminds me of when we were kids," one older worker said to her colleague, "cheering like this for our baseball teams." "Except this is even more exciting," her colleague replied. "It's a boy fighting against all odds." Richard watched intently. Catherine had stayed and stood beside him. "What will you do if he succeeds?" she whispered. "I'll keep my word, but I'm already thinking beyond that," Richard answered. Tyler made the final adjustments. He'd found the part that was installed backward, a silly mistake that had gone unnoticed all those years. Carefully, he repositioned the component, checked all the connections one more time. "I think it's ready," he announced, wiping the sweat from his forehead with the back of his dirty hand. A murmur spread through the crowd. Everyone held their breath as Tyler stood before the generator's control panel. "Moment of truth," whispered Jason. Tyler took a deep breath and pressed the start button. Nothing happened. The silence was deafening. Some engineers began to chuckle softly, but were quickly silenced by disapproving looks from their colleagues. "Wait," said Tyler. "There's a trick." He moved to a specific spot on the engine and gave it a precise tap, something that almost looked like a caress. "My grandpa taught me this," he explained. "Sometimes old machines need a little encouragement." He tried again. The generator coughed, sputtered, made a strange noise, and then roared to life with a power that made the ground shake. The yard erupted in applause and cheers of joy. Workers hugged each other, some crying from emotion. The generator was running perfectly, its steady hum echoing like music after 10 years of silence. Tyler, exhausted from the effort and hunger, sat on the ground. Tears streamed down his dirty face as he watched the generator working. "I did it, Grandpa," he whispered. "I did it." Suddenly, his strength gave out. The boy slumped to the side, fainting. Shouts of concern echoed as people rushed to help him. "Call an ambulance!" yelled Richard. "Hurry!" Mrs. Betty was the first to reach him, cradling his head in her lap. "Hang in there, boy," she said, tears in her eyes. "You did it, now just hang on." The ambulance arrived within minutes. The paramedics checked Tyler's vitals and reported he had fainted from exhaustion and hunger, but would be fine with proper care. "I'll go with him," said Richard. "Kath, can you drive?" "Of course," replied Catherine. "Let's go." At the hospital, Tyler was treated immediately. As he received fluids and rested, Richard took the opportunity to make some calls. He wanted to learn more about the boy and his story. Hours later, Tyler woke up in a clean, comfortable hospital room. The first thing he saw was Mrs. Betty's worried face. "Thank God you're awake," she said, smiling. "You gave us quite a scare." "The generator—" Tyler tried to sit up. "Easy, easy." Richard appeared by the bed. "The generator is running perfectly. You did an incredible job." "So I won?" asked Tyler, still confused. "You won much more than you think," said Richard. "But first, there are some things I need to tell you." Richard sat in the chair beside the bed. "I looked into your story, Tyler. I know about your parents, how you ended up with your grandpa. I know he passed 2 years ago and you've been living on the streets since then." Tyler lowered his eyes, ashamed. "No need to be ashamed," Richard continued. "You survived. And more than that, you kept the knowledge your grandpa gave you alive. Know what else I found out?" Tyler shook his head. "Your grandpa, Henry Walker Johnson, was known around here as one of the best mechanics in town. He never had formal training, but he had a natural gift for understanding machines. Several shop owners told me stories about him." "It's true," said Tyler, his eyes shining. "He could listen to an engine and know exactly what was wrong. And he passed that gift to you." Richard smiled. "Tyler, I want to make you an offer. Not just the reward I promised, but something more. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing." "What kind of offer?" asked Tyler cautiously. I want to offer you a full scholarship. School, technical courses, whatever you need. And a place to live, of course. We have a small apartment we use for out-of-town employees. It can be yours." Tyler's eyes widened in disbelief. "Are you serious, sir?" "Dead serious. But there's one condition." Tyler's heart sank. There was always a condition. "What is it?" "That you agree to work part-time at the company as an apprentice. I want you to teach our engineers what you know while they teach you the theory. What do you say?" Tyler couldn't respond. Tears came before words, and he cried like he hadn't since his grandfather passed away. It was happiness, relief, gratitude, all mixed together. "I'll take that as a yes," said Richard, his voice thick with emotion. In the days that followed, Tyler's story spread through the company and the neighborhood. Jessica's video went viral on the company's social media, showing the moment the generator roared back to life. Employees who had barely noticed the boy on the streets before now greeted him with respect. Robert Jenkins tried to sue the company for wrongful termination, but with the video exposing his sabotage, he failed. Other engineers, inspired by Michael and Jason's humility, began rethinking their own attitudes. Tyler was enrolled in a good school in the South Side. On his first day, he was nervous, wearing the new uniform Catherine had bought him. "What if the other kids don't like me?" he asked Mrs. Betty, who had become a mother figure to him. "Just be yourself," she advised. "You earned the respect of trained engineers. Teenagers will be easy." And she was right. Tyler made friends quickly, his story inspiring classmates and teachers alike. In the afternoons, he went to the company working in the maintenance shop. The older mechanics loved having him around, and he soaked up knowledge like a sponge. "That boy's got a future," remarked old Bill, the maintenance supervisor. "Learns fast and isn't afraid to get his hands dirty." Michael and Jason became his mentors, teaching him the theoretical side of engineering. For Tyler, it was fascinating to understand the science behind what he'd always done by instinct. "You know, Tyler," Jason said one day, "you taught me something important. Knowledge comes in many forms. What you learned from your grandfather is just as valuable as what we got from college." "Maybe more," Michael added, "because it came with love and real-world experience." The apartment Richard had offered was small, but comfortable. For the first time in 2 years, Tyler had his own bed, a hot shower, food in the fridge. Sometimes he'd wake up in the middle of the night thinking it was all a dream. On the walls, he hung old photos he'd saved, him and his grandfather in the shop, both grinning, covered in grease. On a special shelf, he placed the few tools he'd inherited from his grandfather, now cleaned and well cared for. A year passed. Tyler was at the top of his class in school and had become indispensable at the company. The generator he'd fixed ran perfectly, and Richard had a plaque installed. "Restored by Tyler Walker Johnson, in memory of Henry Walker Johnson." "You know what your grandfather would say if he saw you now?" Mrs. Betty asked one day as they ate lunch together in the company cafeteria. "What?" Tyler asked. "That the knowledge he gave you didn't die with him. It lives in you and everyone you teach." It was true. Tyler had started giving small lessons to other young apprentices, sharing the tricks and techniques he'd learned. His patience and teaching style reminded everyone of the grandfather he'd loved so much. "Sometimes I think about him," Tyler said. "I wonder what it'd be like if he could see all this." "He does," Mrs. Betty said firmly. "In your heart, he sees." 3 years later, Tyler was about to start technical school. The high school graduation ceremony packed the school auditorium. Richard, Catherine, Mrs. Betty, Michael, Jason, and dozens of company employees were present. When his name was called to receive his diploma, the ovation was deafening. Tyler, now 15 years old, tall and confident, stepped onto the stage. But instead of returning to his seat after receiving his diploma, he asked to speak. "I'd like to say a few words," he began, his voice clear and steady. 3 years ago, I was just a hungry boy who walked into a company asking for food. Today I'm here thanks to people who saw beyond appearances." He paused, searching for Richard in the crowd. "Mr. Richard gave me a chance when no one else would. Mrs. Betty showed me I deserved kindness and care. Michael and Jason taught me that humility and knowledge go hand in hand. and all of you welcomed me like family." Tears streamed down faces in the audience. "But I want to dedicate this achievement to someone who isn't here physically but is in everything I do. My grandfather, Henry Walker Johnson, taught me that knowledge doesn't pick a social class, that calloused hands can be as wise as brilliant minds, that dignity doesn't come from what you have, but from who you are." He raised his diploma. "This is for you, Grandpa, and I promise I'll keep passing on everything you taught me." The audience erupted in applause. On their feet, they celebrated not just a young man's graduation, but the triumph of perseverance over adversity, of talent over prejudice. After the ceremony, Richard approached Tyler. "I have news for you," he said. "Remember that young talent program I mentioned last year?" "I do," Tyler replied. "Well, I've created something better, a training program for at-risk youth, focused on industrial maintenance. Guess who's going to be the junior coordinator?" Tyler's eyes widened. "You're joking." "Never been more serious. You'll continue your studies, of course, but you'll also help shape other young people like you. What do you think?" "I think my grandfather would be very proud," Tyler answered, his voice thick with emotion. 5 years had passed since that fateful day in the company yard. Tyler, now 20, had graduated as a mechatronics technician with the highest grades in his class. The program he helped coordinate had already transformed the lives of over 50 young people. The old generator still worked perfectly, serving as the company's backup. But its value went beyond function. It had become a symbol that knowledge has no address, that talent can be found where we least expect it. On a special morning, Tyler was teaching a new group of apprentices. Among them was a shy, poorly dressed 13-year-old girl who had been found trying to fix bicycles on the street to survive. "The first step," Tyler said, "is to observe. Machines speak to us. We just have to learn their language." The girl timidly raised her hand. "Mr. Tyler, what if we make a mistake?" Tyler smiled, remembering himself years ago. "Mistakes are part of learning. My grandfather used to say every mistake is a teacher in disguise. What matters is not giving up." After class, Tyler walked to the yard where it had all begun. The place had changed. Now there was a modern workshop school where young apprentices trained, but the spirit of the place remained the same. Mrs. Betty, now retired but still a company volunteer, approached. "Thinking about the past?" she asked. "Thinking about how life comes full circle," Tyler replied. "Who'd have thought that hungry boy would become a teacher?" "I would have," she said firmly. "From day one, I saw something special in you. Your grandfather saw it too, Richard saw it. Sometimes we just need someone to believe in us." "Now it's my turn to believe in others," said Tyler. "Exactly. The cycle continues." At that moment, Richard appeared in the courtyard accompanied by a group of businessmen. "Tyler," he called, "come here for a moment." Tyler approached, and Richard made the introductions. "These are local business owners who've heard about our program. They want to implement something similar in their companies." "Is the story about the generator true?" one of them asked. "Every word," Richard confirmed, "and the generator still works. Tyler, why don't you show them?" Tyler led the group to the old generator, now clean and well-maintained, its commemorative plaque gleaming. "This generator represents more than just a working machine," Tyler explained. "It represents the idea that knowledge can come from anywhere, that we shouldn't judge by appearances, that every talent deserves a chance." One of the businessmen, an older man with white hair, grew emotional. "My father was a mechanic," he said. "Never had an education, but he was brilliant with his hands. I spent years being ashamed of that, wanting nothing to do with that world. Now I see I was a fool." "It's never too late to honor where we come from," Tyler said gently. The meeting was a success. 3 companies committed to creating similar programs, and Tyler would serve as a consultant to help implement them. That evening, Tyler returned to his apartment, now decorated with diplomas, certificates, and photos of all the classes he'd taught. But the place of honor still belonged to the photo of him and his grandfather. He sat at the table and began writing in a notebook. It was a project he'd been working on for months, a basic maintenance manual written in simple language, illustrated, meant for young people without technical training. The working title was Workshop Wisdom, honoring Henry Walker Johnson. As he wrote, he remembered his grandfather's words. "Tyler, my boy, knowledge is like a seed. If you keep it to yourself, it rots. But if you plant it in others, it grows into a forest." And that was exactly what he was doing. Planting seeds, creating forests of opportunity where there had once been barren ground. The phone rang. It was Jason. "Tyler, have you seen the applications for the new semester of the program?" "Not yet. How many?" 230. "We'll have to be strict with selections." "Or expand the program," Tyler suggested. "You and your big ideas," Jason laughed. "Remember when you were that shy kid in the courtyard?" "I do. And I remember you all believed in me when even I didn't." "Best bet we ever made. See you tomorrow, coordinator." Tyler hung up, smiling. Coordinator. Who would have thought? The street kid had become the coordinator of a life-changing program, but he knew titles didn't define his worth. His worth was in the lives he touched, the knowledge he shared, the legacy of his grandfather he kept alive. He stood and walked to the window. Below, he could see the company's lit-up courtyard. Sometimes late at night, curious kids would linger by the fence, watching the machines, dreaming of opportunities. Tyler always told security to treat them kindly. You never knew when one of them might be the next to surprise the world. He returned to the table and kept writing. He had a lot of work ahead, many lives to change, much knowledge to share. The generator in the courtyard kept running, its steady hum a reminder that miracles happen when we give chances to those we least expect. And Tyler, the boy who once walked in asking for food and left transforming lives, was living proof of that. He looked once more at the photo of his grandfather and whispered, "Thank you for everything, Grandpa." The chain of good keeps going, and it would continue for generations and generations, because some lessons are timeless. Knowledge doesn't choose its cradle, dignity doesn't depend on a diploma, and the greatest riches are those we share. That night, while the city slept, Tyler worked late on his manual. Every page was a tribute to his grandfather. Every chapter, a bridge between street smarts and formal knowledge. Tomorrow would be another day of classes, of young apprentices, of lives being transformed. But today, in this moment, he was just Tyler, the grandson of Henry Walker Johnson, honoring a promise made long ago to pass on what he had received with love. And so, the story of the boy who fixed a generator that had been idle for a decade became legend in the company, inspiration in the neighborhood, and an example for the country. But for Tyler, it would always be the story of a grandfather who believed in his grandson, and a grandson who never forgot where he came from. The legacy of Henry Walker Johnson lived on, not in cold machines of metal, but in hearts warmed by hope, hands willing to work, and minds open to learning. And that indeed was the greatest achievement of all. The end of the story. Now tell us what you thought of this moving journey of triumph. Leave a like if you also believe knowledge transforms lives, and subscribe for more inspiring stories like this one.